Greetings, mathematicians, and welcome to our next lesson in comparing bits and pieces. Today we're talking all about rates and unit rates. Go ahead, pause the video, write down this focus question, please. Our focus question is, well, what are rates, and how can I change a rate into something we call a unit rate? Well, let's go ahead and define some of our terms, and let's see how we do it. All right, go ahead and copy down this sentence here. A blank is a ratio that compares two quantities with different kinds of units. Now, we talked about ratios in our last lesson, but this time we're starting to look at more specific ratios. And so this is actually our definition for the word rate. A rate, it's just a ratio, right? Do you see how those two words are connected? Rate, ratio. They are related to one another. And so we just say that a rate is a ratio that compares two quantities or two numbers with different kinds of units. If you could underline different kinds of units, I'm doing a little squiggly underline. Go ahead and underline different kinds of units. This is important here. Let's take a look at an example. Here's an example of a rate. Let's say that I can write, or I can type 100 words every 2 minutes. This is an example of a rate. It's a ratio that's comparing two quantities or two numbers, right? You see the 100, you see the 2. Now the only difference now is that we have this thing with different kinds of units. So if we take a look at the top, our units are words. Our units is words. Units are words. On the bottom, or in the denominator, our units are minutes. So we're comparing a ratio, or we have a ratio that's comparing the number of words to the number of minutes. Different kinds of units. Okay. Now we're going to take a look at how we can change this ratio or this rate into something we call the unit rate. All right, I want you to pause the video and write this next sentence down. When a rate is simplified so that it has a blank, it is called a blank. Now, remember in our last lesson, we're able to take ratios and change them into equivalent ratios, right? We can either make them bigger, right, by multiplying, or we could make them smaller by dividing, right, both of the numbers, okay? So in this case, we're going to be simplifying our rates or our ratios. So when a rate is simplified so that it has a, we'll say denominator of 1, it is called a unit rate. When a rate is simplified so that it has a denominator of 1, it is called a unit rate. This number here, this 1 here, is super important. This 1 is what makes something a unit rate. So if you're trying to write a unit rate, you must have this 1 there. This 1 must be a part of the ratio you're writing. Otherwise, we can't call it a unit rate. Let's take a look at how we do it. So I'm actually gonna add some whoops, that's not what I wanted. There we go. So I'm going to circle this 1, and I'm going to label this super important, because a lot of kids, I realize when we work with unit rates, they forget this detail, and this is a very important detail about unit rates. This 1 actually is why we call it the unit rate, because if you think of a single unit, right, 1, unit, 1, unit is singular, 1 is singular, so that's why we call it a unit rate, because it has the number 1 in it, okay? So let's take a look at how we change a rate into a unit rate. We're going to write down the steps on how to find a unit rate. The first step. Good, pause the video, copy this down. The first step, you're going to write the two quantities. There we go, now you can read it. The first step, you're going to write the two quantities as a fraction, and this is going to help us set up our calculation. Okay, so setting things up as a fraction is going to help us. Before I get into step 2, I thought, well, why don't we just write an example as we go? Okay, so I'm going to include this example over here that we actually mentioned above. So this 100 words every 2 minutes, we're going to use this as our example here. So first step, write the two quantities as a fraction. We already did that. So we have this 100 minutes over, 100 words. And this is my numerator, right, the top number. Then in the denominator, we have 2 minutes, right? So the bottom number is 2. Okay, now go ahead, pause the video and write down step number 2. Step number 2 is to divide both the numerator and denominator by the denominator. So essentially what we're doing here is we're taking this fraction and we are simplifying it a little bit. We're going to be dividing both the numerator and the denominator by a single number. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So our original fraction is 100 minutes. I keep writing minutes. 100 words over 2 minutes. And remember, we're going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. So let's look at what the denominator is. The denominator is 2. So we're going to be dividing both of these numbers by 2. So I'll do that in red here. So I'm going to divide the numerator by 2, and I'm going to divide the denominator by 2. So this is step number 2. Step number 3, we're going to take a look at what happens. Well, what happens when we divide the numerator and the denominator by 2? Well, that's where we have step 3. This will create a denominator of 1, which is exactly what we need when we're writing unit rates. So let's go ahead and simplify our fraction. So when I do 100 words divided by 2, that gives me 50. When I do 2 divided by 2, I get 1. So my fraction now looks like this. It is 50 over 1. And now let's take a look at step 4. And step 4 is also very important. Go ahead, copy down this last step here. Step 4, write the units for each number. This is so important. We need to give meaning to these numbers. And if you can give meaning to the numbers, then that means you understand them a little bit more. So all we have to do is write some words. What is this 50? Well, remember the 100 was words, and we simplified it, so the 50 remains as words. So it looks like I can type 50 words in 1 minute. And now we've given these numbers meaning. 50 over 1 doesn't really tell me much, but now that I've added these words in here, it tells me a story. Oh, I can type 50 words in 1 minute. And there you have a unit rate. We're going to take a look at some more examples. All right, go ahead and copy down this example. I had to go into the back of my page because I ran out of room. So if you ran out of room too, go ahead and do the same thing. All right, so here's a problem. Alex can run 24 miles in 3 hours. What is his speed in miles per hour? So I'm going to take a look at the last question here. It says, what is his speed in miles per hour? This is important here. This miles per hour is a unit rate, right? Because we're trying to find the number of miles in how many hours? in 1 hour. So you see how that 1 hour makes our unit rate? So that's a big giveaway here. So we need to change this 24 miles in 3 hours to however many miles in 1 hour. Let's go ahead and follow our steps. So the first step, write the two quantities as a fraction. The two quantities I have, 24 miles and 3 hours. So I can definitely write a ratio here. So I'm going to write 24 miles in the numerator and 3 hours in the denominator. So there we go. That's step one. Step number two, we're going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. My denominator is 3. The number on the lower part of the fraction is 3. So that's what I'm going to divide by. So I'm going to divide both of these numbers by 3. And let's see what I get. So along the top, in the numerator, 24 divided by 3. Quick, mental math. That gives me an 8. And then 3 divided by 3 gives me a 1. Step 3 is complete. We're on to step 4. Write in those units, please. What does this 8 represent? Well, I took 24 miles and divided by 3, so that doesn't change. So this is 8 miles. And then along the bottom, that doesn't change either. We had hours in the denominator, so we should have hours again in the denominator. Except it's a single hour, so we don't need to write hours. So, take a look. This is our unit rate. Alex can run 8 miles in 1 hour. Is anyone a runner? Is that a good time? Ask your parents. If any of them run, ask if that's a good time. But there we go. We have successfully changed this rate of 24 miles in 3 hours to a unit rate, 8 miles for 1 hour. And unit rates are so helpful for us because then we can change this unit rate however we want to, and then it's amazing. Let's take a look at another example. All right, pause the video, copy down this questionnaire. So, you buy 5 pounds of chocolate for $35. The question is asking us, how much does 1 pound cost? Remember, 1 is a very important number here. This 1 is a big giveaway. We need to find the unit rate. We need to figure out, well, how much does 1 pound cost? So, let's follow our steps. Step 1, write a fraction of the two quantities, of the two numbers. It looks like my quantities are 5 pounds and $35. Okay, so here's where things might get a little tricky because we want to change the 5 pounds into the 1. So the pounds is actually going to be in the denominator of my fraction here. So let me write it like this. So here's my fraction bar. 5 pounds is going to go in the denominator, and $35 is going to go in the numerator. And remember, this is because I need to change this 5 pounds into 1 pound, right? And remember, when we're writing unit rates, the 1 is going to be in the denominator. So in this case, I need to put pounds in the denominator here. All right, so I have my fraction. Let's go ahead and divide both the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. My denominator is 5, so I'm going to divide both numbers by 5. So I'm going to do 35 divided by 5, and then 5 divided by 5. And let's see what we get. Here is step 3. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 5 divided by 5 is 1. And there we have finished step 3. Step 4, write the units. 7 is dollars, so $7, and 1 is pounds, or 1 pound. So it looks like 1 pound costs $7. And this is our answer here. And there you have it. That's how you find the unit rate. Follow these steps and you will never fail. All right, folks, I will see you in the next lesson.